Okay, so this video is about the Nissan Patrol auto freewheeling hub. Just going to talk about a couple of things. One is that people get the problem on cold mornings. They start to drive off for a short period. They hear a ratcheting sound. As they go to stop, then you get a clunk in your driveline. If you keep driving as it's ratcheting, it'll just keep ratcheting away. You're not too certain where the noise is coming from. Probably coming from inside here. The second part of the video is for those who wish to convert these to a manual locking hub by removing this ring. A lot of people talk about shoving a screwdriver or a pry bar into here and levering it out. I'll show you the easy way to get it out without having to damage anything, pry bars or anything like that. We'll also show how the auto locking hub actually, how it works or how it should be working. Okay, so firstly what we'll do is we'll show you how to remove this, I think it's called a brake, how to remove the brake from the hub assembly without using a pry bar. As you can see in here, there's a spacer washer, or it's actually also used as a fitment so when it locks into the hub, so it aligns into the actual axle. So that actually comes out. So the easiest way to get it out is just get yourself something like a brass hammer, something soft, something that you're not going to wreck the aluminium or dent the aluminium with. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to hold it upside down and trying to do this without hitting my fingers in the camera. As you see, that'll pop the ring, that'll pop the brake, and then you'll have your inner hub. Okay, at this point if you want to remove the inner hub from there, all you do is just turn it back over again, and just again with your brass hammer, you just tap the top, and the inside falls out like that. And you'll have the inside case, which as you can see has got some gears into it. And then on the inner piece you've also got some gears, and this works on a spring, and that's what happens when you lock it. It comes down and there's some more gears on the inside as well. On the outer section what you've got is you've got two rings that sit inside each other, and generally what I've seen is when people say they convert them to manual hubs and they force this out, they actually leave this inner section in, which is wrong because that could just fall out and just go loose. Because there's a circlip in there. If you want to go to manual hubs, just take the whole thing out as one piece. As you can possibly see, this moves, and it's hard to turn by hand, but if you push on the circlip you can get it to spin around. And it's that ramping action that'll make the auto locker work. So I'll go over to the car and I'll put this brake actually how it should be fitted onto your axle if you're still using it, and you'll see how it actually locks in. Now I can't get my tripod any lower than this, but what you'll see is on your actual axle stud there's 4 cutouts, and if you ever go to try and fit your auto lock hub back on, and if it's in the lock position, because that's how you take it off, you're always fighting against trying to push this thing because you've got the spring pushing against it. And what happens is if you don't line it up properly, you might be able to force it on eventually, but force is the wrong way. What you need to do is you need to get those 4 lock tabs to fit into the 4 lock pins. I'll just zoom in. And there's a lock pin there, or a slot, and there's a slot there. And as it goes on, it'll lock in. And as you can see, this is how the actual mechanism starts to work. This outer section's fixed. When you apply into four-wheel drive and you apply drive into your drive shafts, it starts turning, and what it'll do is it'll start ramping these actions up, which will push into the spring, which then locks the whole mechanism. So why does it ratchet? Well, it'll probably ratchet because you're getting half drive for some reason, and that could be too thick of oil in your transfer case. So for auto locking hubs you use automatic transmission fluid, not manual transmission fluid, or that could be the cold weather. The only other thing is, if you had too much grease packed into this section here, and this was pushing this back too far, that could cause the ramping action. So when you grease it, you only need to put a smear of grease on the locking ring, and in the later editions it's not even on the circlip. The circlip's clear. So this should be pretty clear like that. When I go to put it back together, I'll show you how it should fit in without being forced on. Okay, so with these two parts still out of the actual hub, as I say, if you see here, you can see you've got a void, then you've got a spot that's filled from the inner ring, and as I say, that inner ring turns, and obviously on the opposite side you've got another void. On the actual inner mechanism, you'll see you've got this high or raised area, okay, and then you've got a low area, and then you've got these two ramping locks, and that's what actually sits into there to ramp up. Now I can't push it because it's just too strong, but in reverse you can see pushing down, and what will happen is that'll ramp up, or the inner one will ramp up because the outer one's fixed, as we saw on the brake. The inner one will start ramping up, and eventually it'll push it together like that, and that's then what locks your auto locking hub. And as you reverse, it'll go to a certain spot, it'll unlock, and if you kept going, it'll ramp up. Much the same way as a Harapee locker or an E-locker. So that ramping action where it turns and unturns. So obviously there's in the manual, the workshop manual, this isn't pulled to bits. This is not described as an item to pull to bits or clean. There's no exploded view of it, but that's what it is. Also at the base of it you've got a sealed bearing that'll sit into the actual locking part that'll sit there. I presume that's just to support it and keep it centered. It's not high speed spinning or anything, activity like that. And with this raised section, when you go to put it back together, because you've got the inner circlip and the two tangs on the inner circlip, they have to go opposite. So it should all sit flat in the pack. Now, as I said, if you want to just convert your auto hubs to manual hubs and just get rid of that, then just remove that whole ring. Don't have it half pregnant, because otherwise the inner ring will just flop around and do nothing. Now I'll put it back together, and then I'll show you what's that ratcheting noise and where it comes from. To stick it back together, the only since no trick. And probably what I should say is, in the manual, because there's nothing about the manual, it doesn't talk about how much oil or grease or what should ever be on it. It seems to be a dark coloured grease. Now my axle seals don't leak, so it's not axle oil. It's probably like a molybdenum, if I can say that. That's probably what a grease is, and it's not heavy. Now some people say these fail because you've packed too much grease in there. I don't see how that would happen, because it wouldn't cause the spring. It's more so there's too much grease, as I said, on the outer axle, which is putting undue force on the whole centre, and it's actually pushing that inwards, which then starts the locking noise. So that's why you've got to be careful about the grease. Okay. To get it back together, obviously you've got this part of the bracket which holds the top piece all together. That doesn't come apart, that's all pressed down. Okay. And inside, if it picks it up, outside of the cogs, you've got two voids opposite each other, and that slot's got to go into those voids. How I can't get that inner circle out, or probably if I kept hitting it, because I think it was just a push fit in there. I don't know if there's any screws, I don't think there's any under the tab holding it. But how I think it works after that part for the locking is, as it comes under, these legs actually go under the plastic, and I presume it's got a ramp that as you turn the outer section to lock it or unlock it, it ramps those up and down, which then causes that to go in and out. Okay, so I'll just put that back together. Now if you line it up correctly, it should just nearly just drop in. Should just drop in. And that's in. Then, as I said, that top section, get the high section, opposite goes the spring, and then somewhere along the line is that should line up. All going well. You should be able to push down a little bit on it. And then all you do is once you get your ring, just put your ring back in, and that should just push in evenly. And we're now got it back together. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and get it to make that ratcheting noise. So as you see, if it's all back together, it's in the auto position at the moment, there's no noise. If I click it over to the lock position, we should see the bottom inside go down, and now we can't turn anything. Everything's locked, or the lock ring still moves, but we're now locked on the inside. Okay. Why that lock ring still moves, because that's still connected to the hub. It's always connected to the hub. Okay. Now, to get this to make that ratcheting sound, I'm just going to turn it just off auto. It might take me a few goes. Still haven't engaged those dog teeth yet. Still haven't engaged them yet. And there you go. So they're just starting to pick up those teeth, and it's a bit hard to get your fingers in there and hold it. But that's what you start hearing. And what that's caused is because for some reason your lock has started to, or your drive started to ramp up those little lock pins and cause it to lock. As I say, if you can never get rid of it, if you got the wrong oil in your transfer, change it. If you're still getting it on cold starts and you really want to get rid of it, change the manual hubs or take that out. That's the cheapest way, is just take that out. So we'll go back to the car and fit this and show you what it should look like. Now, as I said, is when you take the auto hub off your car, it should be in the lock position. I don't really understand the reason why the manual says that, but that's what it says. But if you go to stick that in, you might struggle to get it in. So what we're going to do is we're going to put it back into the unlock position, or the auto position, which puts some pressure on that plate. Now you can squash that plate, and that's what happens if you're fitting this back onto your car and you seem to be squashing and compressing that plate down against the force of the springs, then you've done it wrong. Okay, remember, we've got to get those lined up, those 4 tabs lined up with the actual slots in the hub. So we'll go back and see that. Just before I go back to the car, I'll probably show you why people do wrestle trying to get this out by leaving it with the screwdriver, and they're trying to pry all this out. What happens is, as you can see round the edges, you've got some flattened off sections which sit into the ring. It allows it to move, but obviously it's designed not to make it fall through the hole. And what you're doing by forcing it, you're actually deforming it, you're twisting it, you're scarring it, you're marking it, so don't do that. Anyway, back to the car. Okay, so probably for the purpose of this demonstration I probably should have taken the wheel off the actual axle so you can see a bit better picture. But what we've got to try and do is we've got to get this flange mated with the hub flange without any pressure. So we don't want any spring pressure pushing against it. As I said, we get those tabs lined up. In the manual, to remove the hub, you put it into the lock position, which puts pressure or pulls the inside down. To put it back on there, you put it back into the auto position. And let's make sure this is right, the auto position. So back in the auto position, this has got some free movement, so it's might spin on you, so you've got to line it up correctly. And in the manual, as I say, it'll show you in the diagram on the left hand side the picture of the two mating surfaces joining together without the pressure on them. Okay, so the easiest way is to pick a spot. So we're probably about 1 o'clock there. We'll line up one of our marks at 1 o'clock roughly. We'll put it on. We're not worried about the bolt holes lining up, and it's just a merry dance until it goes together. I'll take the camera off. I'm going to be a bit wobbly on this now. So you can see now that the two mating surfaces are together. Now I'll take it off again, and I'll stick it on without it being lined up, and I'll try and get the camera in the right spot. Okay, so we're on the hub, but as you can see at the back there's a gap. There's a gap in the mating surfaces. So we just got to keep moving it round until the two line up. Okay, and I'm going to go back to trying to clock it in correctly. So should be somewhere around there. Okay, now we've got it in. So as you see, you can now do your bolts up, and there's no pressure pushing your bolts away. So let's get the camera back on. And just with the two bolts, you've seen that's pulled it up to the mating surface, just hand tight, and there's no spring pressure pushing back. Now I'll just stick it back together. Okay, so we've got our bolts all back on. We'll just make sure it goes back to the lock position, which it does. Auto, lock, and back to auto. Okay, so that's how we do it. Just on a side note, if you've watched anyone else's videos talking about the HavaCrack e-locker and the small screws that are in the side plate holding the pressure spring plate on, have you ever thought it's only these bolts that put the hub and the transfer from the axle all the way to the wheels? They're not very big either, so but they work most of the time.